As we send troops into harm's way, and as you personally well know, it's our job to ensure that they have the tools and the resources they need to carry out the mission they're asked to carry out. We never want Americans to be involved in a fair fight. We always want them to be involved in an unfair fight where they have every possible advantage. Doesn't always work out that way, but it should always be our goal, and that's what the Defense Authorization Bill is designed to do. This will be the 55th consecutive year that the Congress has passed, the Senate's passed the National Defense Authorization Act. The leadership of Chairman McCain, of Ranking Member Jack Reed, makes it possible for us to be here one more time, emphasizing that the #1 priority of the federal government is to defend the country. It's hard to find a bill that we pass every year for more than half a century, but this critical piece of legislation really provides the vision and the authorization necessary for the military to move forward and to do that #1 job of defending America. There has been, and I think today we'll see again in the vote on this bill, the strong bipartisan support that this bill always receives, though there's sometimes a discussion about when it should be passed. We have not failed to pass it in a long time. It includes a lot of provisions that I think will make a big difference. One is a pay raise for our troops that they deserve. It's the largest pay increase in the last 6 years. And begins to fulfill our commitment to those who currently serve, as well as we need to fulfill our commitment to those who have served. I'm also glad that there's a vital project to the nation that happens to be located in my state, in St. Louis, Missouri. This is the final version of this bill, includes authorization for the land acquisition for the national geospatial movement from the south part of St. Louis, where it's been for 7 decades, to a new location that allows them to build a facility that becomes, as it is right now, fully backing up the only other facility in the world that does the level of geospatial work that this one does. When something happens in Springfield, Virginia, that location isn't monitoring the world as it usually does, all of that work goes to St. Louis, where on every other day they share the responsibility for geospatial. There's a provision in here at a more fundamental level of safety to build a fire station at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. So everything from building a fire station to creating a $1.7 billion facility that allows us to further keep an eye on the world as we do now is a good thing. It also addresses the issue that was raised earlier this year concerning members of the National Guard, men and women who were given a bonus and then wrongfully asked to return that bonus. It was not their error. That money in most families has long ago been spent, was thought to be appropriately handed over to them, and they shouldn't be penalized because other people made a mistake when that distribution was made, and with this bill, they will not be penalized. I think there's an increase here in strength. It's in the conference report. I certainly supported Senator Moran's efforts on this issue and commend him for the hard work he put forward to be sure that we don't lose any more ground on the strength we have and the ability we have to be ready. Making down payments on our readiness issues, stabilizing our force at a time when we really face more challenges around the world, not less, was a minimum thing for us to do. But the bill does that. Senator Moran's leadership was important in accomplishing that as well. Now, this bill, once again, puts Congress on record against the president's plan to move terrorist detainees held at Guantanamo Bay to any location on U.S. soil. I, along with a majority of Americans, oppose the idea that we'd bring these terrorists here. The president made a campaign pledge really a decade ago now, and 10 years later, not only has that campaign pledge not been able to be fulfilled, but the Congress once again today asserts our view that it should not be fulfilled. The administration admitted earlier this year that Americans have been killed by terrorists released from Guantanamo. They made that admission, by the way, just days before they approved another dozen inmates to transfer somewhere else in the world where I don't think they can be kept count of and track of like they need to be. We don't need to close this facility. We don't need to abandon the facility. And I'm glad that there are strict prohibitions here that don't allow that to happen. This bill also makes important steps toward enhancing the quality of life for our service members and their families. General Ray Odinero, the recently retired Chief of Staff of the Army, said that the strength of the military is in military families, and we need to do a better job recognizing that. I hope we're able to advance an effort that was in the Senate bill that didn't get in the final bill, the Military Family Stability Act, next year. This is an action that would allow military families to stay longer at a location or to move earlier than the individual who's in the military does if there's a professional reason or an education reason for that to happen. The investment that military families have made in the country, the investment they've made in what the person serving has learned in a very complicated defense world don't need to be unnecessarily complicated by whether someone gets to finish a year in elementary school or gets to stay another 3 months so they could graduate from high school, particularly if the person in the military is willing to go on ahead and bear their own expense until the family, with the family assistance that families get as living assistance, the family then moves later. This was determined by everybody that looked at it except the Pentagon to have no cost. And every senior officer that came before the Defense Appropriating Committee, I asked about this concept of in making it a little easier for people to stay, for a spouse who needed to go ahead and move a little early to start that teaching year at a new school, get a job that was available at a hospital, to do whatever that spouse could do to continue to have their professional career. I asked officer after officer, what do you think about this? And one after another, they all said, this is exactly the kind of investment we need to make. We didn't quite get there in this bill, and I'm grateful that Senator McCain has pledged to work further to study why the Pentagon itself, or at least the Department of Defense at the highest levels, is the only place that thinks this would cost anything or would be too much trouble. Wouldn't be too much trouble. I hope we see it in the bill next year. Now, someone who's really helped in my ability to look at this bill, the work that I do as a member of the Defense Appropriations Committee, the work that we do with great military facilities in our state is here on the floor today, Major Andy Anderson. He's been a great resource to our office, and we have benefited for some time now having military fellows come in and spend a year with us. I continue to hear from them that it also is a great benefit to them to see how this part of the process of preparing to do what's necessary to help them defend the country works. The knowledge and experience that Major Anderson has gained as an Army officer helped in discussions we had both in the state and in the nation. I've been particularly appreciative of his willingness to go beyond what might be considered the typical duties of a military fellow in a Senate office. For instance, he's taken personal interest and has been instrumental in assisting a Missouri family in getting their father's remains returned home from Laos after having been shot down over Laos during the Vietnam War. He has devoted a lot of time to gathering and analyzing data on legislative history and actions that will continue to be critical to the office moving forward. I want to also thank his family and wish him the best as he and his wife Audra and their sons Reed and Joel go to what military assignment they have next. This bill renews the Iran Sanctions Act, and the Iran Sanctions Act would have expired at the end of the year. I'm certainly hopeful that the administration understands that this act is really a foundational element of the regime that they entered into. It was an agreement that I didn't support. I still don't support it. But extending the Iran Sanctions Act is perfectly consistent with what the Iran nuclear agreement purports to do. If the Iran Sanctions Act is a problem, the Iran nuclear agreement is just as bad as I thought it was. When that agreement was completed, the administration repeatedly promised that U.S. sanctions on Iran for its support of terrorism would remain in place under the agreement. For example, the day the agreement was announced, President Obama himself said, "We will maintain our own sanctions related to Iran's support of terrorism." The administration continues to recognize the Iranian state as the leading state sponsor of terrorism. This Iran Sanctions Act extension sends another message to Iran that the Congress and the country of the United States are paying attention. It gives the next administration a powerful tool to hold Iran responsible, and I certainly urge the president to sign this bill. I urge my colleagues to vote for it, but I just say in conclusion that once again, for 55 years in a row, the Congress of the United States is going to make the point that the number one obligation of the federal government is to defend the country, and this bill helps allow that to happen.